Hi, NSCS leaders. It's Laura Horn here from the Active Minds National Office, and it is such my honor to be with you here today for your Leadership Summit. So thank you for giving me a little bit of your time today. I'm speaking to you from New Orleans, Louisiana, where I was born and raised, and I happen to be very close to Tulane and Loyola University, two of our Active Minds chapters, and they're part of our network of 15,000 students across the country who are very passionate about mental health, in particular self-care. So today I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit about what we mean when we talk about self-care, why it's important, how to maintain your own wellness and self-care during stressful times like exams, and how to help build a culture in your community and on your campus and all around you that helps you prioritize self-care. But first, I need to relay a very important message to you on behalf of all of my colleagues, and that's that we are so incredibly grateful for all of the fundraising and programming that you engaged in on your campus this past year. As part of our partnership, you all raised more than $14,000 for the Active Minds movement, and that is incredible. So congratulations on that achievement, and thank you for joining us in this challenging but greatly needed work to raise money for mental health education and awareness. And those funds go a long way in the Active Minds movement towards helping us to develop and disseminate mental health resources to the more than 5 million people that we reach each day. The fact that you are able to raise as much as you did tells me that you get it, you understand, and you were likely touched by this issue in one way or another, or someone that you know has been. And so you know that the funding to support people with mental health issues is a critical need, not just on our campuses, but for our country. So thank you for your help and support. We're so thrilled to have this partnership with you and for you to have shared your voice with us in elevating this issue as a priority on campuses and our community and across the country. And if you are a fan of Parks and Rec like I am, then you recognize the title of my workshop, Treat Yourself, as a reference to a moment in Parks and Rec, which I think helps introduce the topic of self-care. So enjoy this quick little clip.
Treat yourself in 2011. Once a year, Donna and I spend a day treating ourselves. What do we treat ourselves to? Clothes, treat yourself. Fragrance, treat yourself. Massage, treat yourself. Mimosa, treat yourself. Fine leather, treat yourself. It's the best day of the year. The best day of the year.
So that clip may be getting a little bit old now, but I think it always makes me laugh, and I think it helps talk about self-care in a way that we can all relate to. Donna and Tom, they treat themselves to a Treat Yourself Day once a year, and they engage in activities that we frequently think of as self-care. But I'm really curious about what self-care means to you, and would encourage you to take 30 seconds and just come up with your own definition before we move forward. All right, awesome. Everyone seems to be talking about self-care right now, and actually last week was International Self-Care Day, so you may have seen actually a lot mentioned in pop culture about it. But you know, from Brandon Marshall to Kristen Bell to Ellen DeGeneres and The Rock, celebrities are giving voice to this concept of self-care. And what they're really, I think, letting people know is that it's okay to not be okay sometimes. And that moments of stress and feelings of overwhelming don't discriminate, that even the most successful and powerful among us have to intentionally engage in some positive mental health in order to maintain their own self-care. I wonder which of these quotes resonates most with you, and if any surprise you. Perhaps they remind you of times that you've seen self-care mentioned in the media or elsewhere. My favorite that I've seen is from Kristen Bell, and it's quite simple. She says, sometimes you just need to order pizza. Now, of course, self-care is much more than just ordering your favorite food, which we're going to talk about more later. But I think what Kristen is really saying is that self-care often looks like giving ourselves permission to prioritize ourselves, to put ourselves first, which can be so hard for so many of us, especially those of us who are high achievers and are beholden to a lot of different responsibilities and people who have a lot of expectations of us. But balancing multiple responsibilities requires taking some time to put ourselves first from time to time. I want to give you a chance to think about what gets in the way of prioritizing self-care for you. But first, I wanted to talk through, why do we often treat self-care like a luxury? Like Donna and Tom from Parks and Rec, who treat themselves to the Treat Yourself Day once a year, why do we think of self-care as this once in a year kind of thing, this optional activity that only the lucky of us get to engage in? And why only on a limited basis? We often think of self-care as this activity that we shouldn't go too far with, that there's a danger in prioritizing ourselves too often. But in reality, our whole operating system, our whole brain doesn't function properly when we don't attend to self-care. We end up burning out. In order for us to wake up and have a fully functioning brain and body every day, it's mandatory, it's actually required that we think about self-care every once in a while. Think about driving a car, for example. When you hit 3,000 miles, you're supposed to get your oil changed, right? And if you're like me, I used to try to push that as far as I could. But if you've done that too, then that's not a really good idea. It's just not how the engine works. We can ignore that little sticker on our windshield that's telling us that the date for our next oil change is coming up. And you can push that mileage as far as you go, but eventually something's going to go wrong with your engine, or it's going to get overheated, or something's going to go worse when you could have just taken the time to get your oil change and save time in the long run. So if you neglect that ongoing maintenance, then you end up breaking down. And that's a lot like when we neglect our own self-care. So take 30 seconds and think about what gets in the way of practicing self-care in your own life. Awesome. So we're talking about what gets in the way of self-care and how to overcome some of those barriers. And I'm going to try to affirm some of the barriers that you may have just thought of because I think they're pretty common and I hear them from a lot of students that I work with. First, you may feel as though you don't have enough time for yourself. This is definitely one of the most common barriers to self-care. When you're busy with all of your responsibilities, it can be difficult to take time for your own needs. When this happens, we're often allowing our to-do list to win and to be prioritized over ourselves. We need to make a conscious effort to remember that self-care is important, and it's just as important as every other item on your list. And like the car scenario, it would be silly for us to say, well, we just don't have time to get our oil changed, right? Because it's really not a question of having enough time. We're always going to be limited by the time we have. It's really an issue of priority. It's what we're putting the priority on and how we spend our time. Second, perhaps your inner critic is telling you that we should feel guilty for prioritizing ourselves, and that we should feel selfish, lazy, or that we're wasting our time when we're prioritizing ourselves. Start to track that inner bully. Start to think about, what are they saying to you? What triggers them to speak? And once you're aware of those negative thoughts, you can begin to challenge them or acknowledge them and then let them go. What would it look like if we really cared for ourselves unconditionally, the way that we would want to treat our friends or our loved ones? And what if we treated ourselves like our best loved ones, our favorite friends, our most cherished loved ones? We would absolutely give ourselves the permission to overcome this particular barrier. Next, we might fear that we will be upsetting somebody in our life. It can be a shock to the system for many people in our lives when we start to prioritize our own needs first. Often this can happen when we want to take a break from social media, where perhaps our friends or family are used to getting a hold of us very soon, or used to hearing from us, or maybe they're used to texting you all the time and you want to take a break from that. If they're used to you responding to their needs and helping them with whatever comes up, they might be a little stunned at first if you say no occasionally, or start to put yourself first and start asking for help yourself. As a result, you might find yourself on the receiving end of some criticism. And if this is the case, that likely means that you're a person who will find this difficult, since you obviously care so much about others and want to be there for them. If appropriate, you may just want to circumvent this by warning the people in your life that you're trying something new. Let them know you're taking a social media break. Let them know you're turning your phone off for a while. And try to bring them on board and let them know why this is so important to you. If it doesn't work, use it as an opportunity to set some boundaries and reflect on your relationships and how to manage them moving forward. Remember that you matter and your needs matter just as much as those around you. And finally, one of the other common barriers that I thought of that can occur as a result of the self-care that you're engaging in and new boundaries you're perhaps setting to preserve that time is you might fear that you'll start drifting away from some of your existing relationships. Maybe you'll notice that the relationship was a one-way street and that they're not supportive of you prioritizing your own needs. Or you might find that your interests no longer align as you pursue your new hobbies or habits. Reflect on those relationships and use those insights to help you manage them moving forward. Taking care of yourself is a whole lot easier when you're surrounded by supportive people in your life. So take one more pause, and this time, think about a time when you were particularly stressed and what helped you overcome that moment. Awesome. So imagine it's that point in the semester again. The pages of your agenda are filled with due dates of midterms, papers, group projects. The amount of hours you sleep keep dwindling down, and the cups of coffee you consume skyrocket. And you manage to go to your 9 a.m. class while running on 4 hours of sleep, and you're greeted by your friends. And together you compare how many hours of sleep you got last night. And one of your friends says that he pulled an all-nighter. And the automatic responses of your friends are, wow, I couldn't do that, and good for you. It make you second guess you having closed your textbook at a certain point and turned off your laptop so that you could sleep for a couple more hours before class. This is a common scenario I experienced while I was in college, and it does seem like it's very common. But is it healthy? Perhaps no. There's no question that college students glamorizing all-nighters is a sign of dedication to school, and what separates an A versus a B student is very common. However, this strain could jeopardize your well-being and your overall happiness. It isn't easy to focus on taking care of your mental health in a culture that describes constant productivity as a measurement of success. So how can you start to prioritize your mental health over your grades? I'm going to share 10 tips you can start working on today to help practice self-care and stress management for when those stressful periods of time may come this year. First, just like you schedule time to attend classes and office hours, you can develop a self-care routine during the school week. It can be simple 5-minute periods throughout the day or an entire block of time, whatever is easiest for you. And during that time, plan to distract yourself to help bring your emotional state back to the equilibrium so that you can try tackling a challenge again, now with a healthier mindset. So schedule some time in your calendar each week to take some time to yourself to do something that's just for you. And I think you'll find that when you re-tackle your studies or your workload or whatever you're working on, you're gonna do so with so much more clarity and so much more comfort than if you wouldn't have taken that time. Think about what makes you happy or what's helped in the past when you needed to relax or distract yourself, and do that. This is a non-judgment zone. If you need to binge on Netflix for a little while, distract yourself, and tackle the issue later, no judgment here. I enjoy doing that too. It's secretly one of my favorite ways to do it, and I also really love cleaning. I'm tempted to feel guilty when I do either of those activities, but really the only way you can do self-care wrong, I think, is when you do it with guilt. So give yourself permission to reset in whatever way that looks to you, and remember that that's part of the requirement. That's going to help you reach your goals, is if you make time for that maintenance during the week. Eating well is also really important for many reasons, but one is that doing so can help you concentrate and be better prepared for when stressful moments come. And look, even dark chocolate is on the list of brain foods to consider, along with bananas, tea, nuts, and blueberries. These are all foods that are known to be really helpful for having immediate effect on your ability to focus, concentrate, and feel healthier. Number 4, sleep is probably the most underrated habit you can start adopting tonight to better take care of yourself. You may be aware that Arianna Huffington, founder of the Huffington Post, is a major proponent of sleep. So much so that she's actually included nap rooms in all of her offices and encouraged her staff to take naps even during the day, during office hours as needed. Most people don't get enough sleep, and I want to share a few things you can do to protect your sleep, because this one in particular is so important and can have a really measurable impact on how you're feeling during the day. Keep your phone out of your room when you're trying to sleep, or at least out of sight if you can. Establish a soothing pre-sleep routine. This is often done for babies. Then somewhere down the line we decide it's not important anymore, but actually we do it, to help babies sleep easier and feel more natural about sleep, and reduce the possibility that they'll wake up in the middle of the night. And establishing a routine that you do every night before bed can help you as an adult as well, believe it or not. So take 30 minutes before you go to bed to remove the stimuli in your life, start to wind down and quiet yourself down so that your body can more naturally go to sleep and stay asleep. Another great thing you can do is to wait to go to sleep until you're truly tired and not force it. And don't watch the clock when you try to fall asleep or when you're wondering if it's time to wake up. Use natural light to your advantage and let the sun tell you when it's time for bed and when it's time to wake up. If you do nap during the day, nap early. Better to take a nap in the morning versus the afternoon so that it doesn't interfere with your usual sleep, and only for 20 minutes or so. Finally, eat lighter dinners and exercise early so that neither your meals nor your physical activity will get in the way of your nice sleep. Number 5 is take a step back. When things get too overwhelming, it's okay to recognize that during college there are times when everything seems a little too overwhelming. Don't be afraid to talk to professors about assignment extensions or extra help. They want you to succeed, and oftentimes they're flexible when you express interest in the class. It's better to turn in an assignment late than try to push yourself beyond your limits. It's also okay to reach out for the help that you deserve. Campuses offer resources such as disability and counseling services to help students, and making a habit to attend individual or group therapy when you need it is a great way to prioritize your mental health. Also, counseling services on campuses commonly offer workshops and groups regarding stress management, test anxiety, coping, and healthy lifestyle habits. If you're unsure about attending those workshops alone, take a friend. This is a great way to discuss stress management and to trade tips. A friend recently shared that when they were struggling with their mental health during their freshman year of college, they noticed a severe drop in their grades. And instead of prioritizing their mental health by practicing self-care and utilizing the resources around them, they attempted to ignore their struggles and took on a more strenuous course load and tried even harder in their classes. You can tell they were trying to improve their grades, but in reality, their performance decreased even further. For the longest time, the student only associated their self-worth with their grades. After making the decision to go to counseling and addressing their mental health concerns, they finally recognized the importance of taking care of their mental health as a student. And after a couple of semesters in college, they were able to change their unhealthy mentality. Similar to the student, your worth as a human being is not solely dependent on your exam scores. It never will be. And sometimes you need to consciously remind yourself of this throughout the semester, and you should. Along the same lines, you're a multifaceted person with strengths, values, and aspirations. For example, I'm a daughter, a sister, a volunteer, a baker, a dog lover, hiker, mental health professional. Taking the time to introspect and recognize aspects of yourself beyond your role as a student is extremely beneficial. It can be hard, particularly at the end of a midterm week, to not evaluate yourself solely on how your research paper compared to the class average or how many times you participated in a class discussion. But sometimes it's easier to evaluate yourself on your transcript and taking the time to look a little bit deeper. It's okay, and take the time and really take some time to journal or write down all the different things that you're balancing and acknowledge for yourself the complexity of who you are and the amount that you're taking on likely and the different roles that you play in among the people in your lives. You're so much more than a student, and you are so worth taking the time for yourself. Number 9, we have more power over our emotions than we sometimes realize. And by asking ourselves 2 questions, we can help manage our stress. First, when you're feeling stressed, ask yourself, is this response warranted? Check to see if the situation warrants the kind of response you're having. And examine the facts. While our emotions are always valid, they're not always justified. Look to see if your emotional response matches the actual circumstances that you're experiencing. Second, once you decide if your response is warranted, ask, am I being effective? Is the way I'm responding to this stress actually helping me in the long run achieve my goals? Examine whether what you're doing is helping or hurting the situation. If it's making it worse, do the opposite of whatever it is you feel like doing and commit to it. If you want to stay home and isolate, force yourself to go out where there are people. If you're angry and want to yell, try avoiding the person who your anger is directed towards. And if you haven't seen Inside Out, you really should, because it helps explain this one even further. Finally, we all need to practice a little more self-compassion, and this is one of my favorite videos I've seen on the topic to help explain more about what I mean by self-compassion.
To survive in this high-pressured, crazy world, most of us have to become highly adept at self-criticism. We learn how to tell ourselves off for our failures and for not working hard or smart enough. But so good are we at this that we're sometimes in danger of falling prey to an excessive version of self-criticism, what we might call self-flagellation, a rather dangerous state which just ushers in depression and underperformance. We might simply lose the will to get out of bed. For those moments, we need a corrective. We need to carve out time for an emotional state of which many of us are profoundly suspicious: self-compassion. We're suspicious because that sounds horribly close to self-pity, but because depression and self-hatred are serious enemies of a good life, we need to appreciate the role of self-care in a good, ambitious, and fruitful life. To this end, we can perform what we've called a self-compassion exercise, a structured meditation lasting 15 minutes or so. Lying in bed, or perhaps a bath, turn over a sequence of thoughts that interrupt and correct the flow of your worst self-accusations. For a time, adopt an entirely kindly perspective on your setbacks. The self-compassion exercise goes like this. We're so in love with success, we fail to notice the scale of the challenges we routinely set ourselves. There is nothing remotely normal about what we've tried to achieve. We failed, but given the mountain we were trying to climb, the conclusion doesn't have to be that we're simply fools.
We have tricky family histories, we all do. There were things which happened to us at the hands of others which can help to explain some of our current troubles. We're not entirely sane or well, but none of us are. We weren't well set up to carry out certain tasks. It isn't wholly our fault in the here and now. From the media, you'd think everyone was rich and famous and successful, but in reality, undramatic, quiet failure is by a huge margin the statistical norm. We shouldn't tear ourselves apart for not managing to beat what were, in truth, awesome odds. Tough, self-critical people don't allow themselves the indulgence of believing in luck. They take responsibility for everything. They think winners make their own luck, but they don't, for the most part. Luck is a genuine feature of existence. We're robbing ourselves of fair consolation by believing that we're entirely in control and therefore entirely to blame when we crash. You are not only your achievements. Status and material success are one bit of you, but there are others as well. Those who loved you in childhood knew this, and in their best moments helped you to feel it. Rehearse the internalized voices of all those who've been kind to you. Bathe in the memory of a love independent of achievement. It seems it will never end. That's not the truth. It's just how a crisis feels. You need to reduce expectations to zero for a time. Take each new hour as it comes. And without being banal, what you need most of all is some rest.
It can be challenging to practice self-care and self-compassion if we live in and work in an environment that doesn't reinforce self-care as a value or requirement. This is often the case on college campuses, and if you're interested in helping to shape your environment to be more supportive of self-care, I have a couple of suggestions for you. First, you can encourage those around you to practice self-care. The next time a friend tells you they're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, encourage them to take a 30-minute, 1-hour break to distract themselves from the issue at hand and revisit it with a healthier mindset. Even better, you can practice self-care with them by encouraging them to take a study break with you, take a walk outside together, or showing them your new favorite TV show or hangout spot. Second, you can also encourage a campus-wide observance of self-care and stress relief by participating in Active Mind's annual Stress Less Week, which you can observe on your own campus during your school's typical exam times. We have a ton of ideas for you to consider as you put together your Stress Less Week, which you can download at the website on the screen. And if you have an Active Minds chapter on your campus, you can even join forces with them to put on joint programming and make an even greater noise about the importance of taking a break. Our staff are also big fans of the resources here, including the many breathing GIFs out there that can help you remember to inhale and exhale when you need a few deep breaths. Try keeping one for yourself to turn to from time to time, or share one on your organization's social media accounts to encourage others to do the same with you. It's truly been my pleasure to be with you today, and I thank NSCS once again for inviting me to be with you and to share about self-care and mental health. As we close out over the remaining minutes, I encourage you to take some time on your own to jot down a few thoughts about how you prefer to practice self-care. And until next time, take care, be well, and remember to take time for yourself. Goodbye.